welcome back to Ready Nerd Go Graphic Policies Tabletop Adjacent podcast thing. I almost had the intro ready then, and
One of these
it
days we'll
went.
get it in one go.
One of the ironic thing is that initially we had the intro down because we were doing this week after week. We were recording. We had a bunch recorded, folks, and now we're doing it more like as we can, which is why it's on a bi-weekly release schedule. Because for some reason, despite living in the same city, Ancon, I just cannot seem to actually find the time every weekend to record. And needless to say, the intro always seems to suffer. So I know last week it was a slight mess. This week it's going to be a slight mess. And at this point, I think we're just going to leave it. My name's Alex. Anko is has already been mentioned by name and has said hello somewhere.
Oh, we're off to a real strong start
Oh, it's going to be good. It's going to be good.
today.
This week
Ah,
we are so in theory we have a topic list that we've pre-planned for what we're talking about every week. Because of what happened at the game session that we had on uh, Wednesday with our group, we thought it would be fun to talk about effectively. Now, I call them action points. But that isn't the right term. You would say they were a meta currency.
yeah, so it's kind of like action points are a type of metacurrency. Metacurrency is kind of just like the umbrella term. Like there's action points, fortune points, bennies. There's different systems will have different words for them, but generally, like a metacurrency is something the players can spend that affects the fiction, like, and they can usually use to like either adjust the fiction somehow or like change their dice or like just modify the odds in their favor generally.
For context, so what had happened in our session, and I'm woefully unfamiliar with action points up until I'd never used one up until this moment. I was playing a clockwork who, when they die, have a risk of blowing up.
Yeah.
I rolled very well if you want to blow everyone in the group up until the point where the range of my explosion was very minimal, and I was like, no, this isn't going to happen. So I said to the group, I said, look, one of two things is about to happen. Either I'm going to use an action point and expand my range to the maximum possible range, and it's going to blow everyone in the room up, or you're going to save my character. It's up to you, but one way or another, the point is getting spent.
Yeah, and like generally speaking, we kind of tweaked the rules for that specific instance because
It,
generally speaking, like, you need to decide whether or not you're going to
yeah,
spend the point before subsequent rolls are made. But the group is currently playing a system that's very new to them. I'm quite used to it, but it's very new to them. And so we're still kind of in the learning phase of, hey guys, remember you have in Shadow the Demon Lord, they're called fortune points, and we're using the alternate rules for a fortune pool, and that's irrelevant to like 99% of the listeners, but context.
well,
And
yeah, valid.
yeah, but
And
it's, hey guys, remember this is an option, because the part that Alex didn't mention, and I think has
I'm
come
very
up
good at this.
before, is that this is not the first time this has happened to Alex's character in this campaign. His previous character was also a clockwork that blew up and took one of the other characters out with him.
Who was
So, like,
also a clockwork?
who was
It
also a clockwork and
and
nearly
who
blew up as well. It was,
fantastic. The fun part is the person whose character I did take out last time would have been one of the ones I took out again. So ultimately, it was like you said. Should it have been done beforehand? Absolutely. Was it more fun for the group on the table to find out that, oh, I'm going to use a point? Maybe I should at least, assuming the DM was okay with it, and Anko was,
yep.
offer to say it's either happening now or it's happening later or it's going to happen or would have happened before. Make your decision.
And to be clear to the folks listening to this as well, in a lot of groups, that could
That,
be considered toxic player behavior. In our group, with the people we play with and how it came about, nobody had any issues with things being presented that way.
No, and that's just it. Like that very well could have been toxic player behavior. It would have been. There's not. I don't even think there's any doubt about that.
Hmm.
I think that again, like you said, with the way our group works, when they found it funny that I was blowing up, I could almost see two of them getting excited to see how much damage I was going to do in terms of everyone in the room dying or just me. And when it was just me, there was almost a visible air of disappointment across across the room. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna spend an action point here, and in Shadow of the Demon Lord, you can spend the action point to increase a dice roll. So you don't even get to change or re-roll. It's you roll change from a 1 to a 6, and that 1 was like just me blowing up, very very tight range, and the 6 would have been the explosion taking out the entire room, which is what I had offered to do. And it's not that I didn't want to create a new character. I had played this character for a total of 4 hours before it would have needed to have recreated him. And same for one of the other guys. We'd only played these new characters for 4 hours at most. And we're like, well, I'm fine with this happening. And I'm going to spend the action point to blow up. And one of our players who wasn't there was actively encouraging this because they thought it would be hilarious too. So it's one of those moments where you've got to know your group if you're going to threaten to total party kill everyone, and
Generally, yes.
generally, and you've also got to have a very good. I knew if I phrased it that way, the clockwork would probably survive, because I thought, as funny as it was, like they're not going to want to just end the session with everyone being dead, but one person in the room. That's probably not the smart or the most enjoyable way for them at that time. So for us, spending the action point at that point was great. It's just the way it worked out. Now, obviously, some groups are going to be really upset when someone's like, "I'm going to spend an action point to kill everyone."
Yeah, don't just drop
No,
that on your group unless you know the group will be okay with it, because that's yeah.
yeah, the fact that it was one of the players that said you're going to use an action point to blow everyone off, I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, I can do this."
Like it was not originally Alex's idea to maximize the radius. One of the other players like, "Ooh, if you did that, it would hit almost everybody." It's like, "Oh yeah, that's an option too."
Right? So you've really got to know your group. Now, again, for us, it was hilarious. It was a good 2 to 3 minutes of laughing until I finally said, "Look, I'm going to use it. How I use it, whether retroactively or not, is up to you." Because we tend to have a habit of fixating on something and just talking over and over and
Hmm.
over again, and it can take up a fair bit of
So
playtime.
long.
Or we also tend to have a habit of having side conversations while people are playing, which is great if you're sitting next to each other and you tend to be quiet talkers. It's absolutely awful if you're a loud talker and the person you're chatting with is on the other side of the table.
Yeah, and then nobody can hear the GM, and the GM can't hear anybody, and it's
And
just
it just, yeah.
yeah.
So at that point, I was like, I need to make a decision. And frankly, I don't care, because the nature of the clockwork character I'm playing, I'm just going to play the same person again, because in this universe, clockworks have a soul taken from hell inhabiting a machine. And I pre-cleared with Anko, who is a DM, the GM, that when this clockwork dies, because it's a when, folks, it's not an if, with Shadow of the Demon Lord, can
Yeah.
I effectively re-roll a new body, a new class, and just have the same soul come back? And he said, "Yeah, that's fine. That's an interesting way to do it." I'm like, "Great." It means that even if I play as a different character, like a goblin instead of a clockwork, when I do bring the clockwork back, it will be the same one that had met the group beforehand. So ultimately, given the way we're playing Shadow of the Demon Lord, it's the role playing aspect is more minimal than just to have fun with monsters and stuff.
Yeah, because we are running kind of a old school mega dungeon style game, which, to be clear, not really the style of gameplay that Shadow of the Demon Lord is suited for, but it's the system I enjoy playing, and I'm the one running
Yeah,
it.
and that's just it.
So,
Now, that actually brings us up to something you touched on earlier, and it's going to be its own little heading in the show notes. I don't know if folks pay attention to the show notes, but we actually make them as we go along. I don't have anything planned out this time. You touched on tweaking the rules to use the points. So I think in this case, just in general, tweaking the rules of the game, yes, to use the points, but also I'm trying not to sneeze again. God damn it. So tweaking the rules just in general to have fun with the games you're playing. How often do you as a GM choose to tweak the rules?
Um, well, in play, minor rules tweaks happen. I'm not going to say frequently, but generally, like once a session or once every other session, there'll be very minor. It's like, hey, the rules don't explicitly allow for this, but everybody at the table thinks it's going to be cool, and it's not disrupting anything. So yeah, let's do it. In the terms of like more larger structural changes, I mostly tend to leave like the base structure of the game alone, mostly because like nobody wants to go, oh, hey, we're going to play, for example, we're going to play D&D. Cool. Here's my thick binder of house rules that changes how everything with the game works. Nobody wants to deal with that. But
In
for
in
something like our current game, where I'm using a system for a style of play that system doesn't really support, I've I have I'm not going to say significantly more rules altercations, but there's a good chunk of additional rules kind of bolted onto the system, and like optional rules that are presented in the system attached to make it play more like what we want to play. Like the biggest one is that by default, Shadow the Demon Lord is every adventure you up a level. Doing an old school mega dungeon, there isn't really adventures so much as just repeatedly plumbing into the
the
same
same,
location again and
yeah.
again and again. So I lifted some old OSR style rules, which is, you gain experience for the treasure you collect, and once you've collected enough treasure, then you level up. That's not how Shadow the Demon Lord works by default, and I've had to tweak the totals a little bit to get them like kind of in line with what we're expecting and what we want out of the gameplay. But they encourage the style of gameplay we want, and it slows down the leveling a bit, so you guys aren't like fighting weak ass little skeletons when you're level like 8 and just mowing through them and not having fun.
No, exactly. And I think to your point, the fact that we haven't. All right. So full disclosure, we all forgot about the action points,
Multiple
fortune
times.
points multiple times, and I think this is the first. Is this the first or second time we've used them
It's
that
a
session?
that's a second session that you guys have remembered to use them.
Okay. I think this is the first time in the session we've used them where there's an actual discussion as to, hey, we can do these because we
Yeah.
don't know how many we have at the beginning of the session. We could reliably assume we had at least 2 or 3.
Yes.
I can never remember the exact number, so in my mind it was always about 2. Which so I knew I had at least one to use because no one else had used any, and I think we used all of them but one by the end point. Now, that being said, I had no idea that Shadow of the Demon Lord just tweaked that much when you were playing. I would not necessarily recommend a new GM
No.
to have done that. Like you said, it's something you have to be familiar with. It is not something that I would be able to do. I would very much be well, hey, this is what the rules say. I'm probably going to be playing it pretty tight to the rules. I think I think that is a subject we should explore.
I was gonna say that would
I
be
think
a great other episode.
yeah, I think it's very much going to be a down the road subject. This is episode 9. This is episode 9 as recorded. So I think that maybe episode 10 we'll talk about tweaking the rules when setting up a game. Have a more GM focused episode. So that does
Yeah.
mean you're going to be doing a lot more talking.
Yeah. To cycle back to this one's topic of metacurrencies.
Mm.
So like Shadow the Demon Lord has a fairly, I'm not going to say heavy use of metacurrency, but it tends a lot of systems, their metacurrency tends to be more along the lines of you can re-roll a check, while Shadow of the Demon Lord is, hey, you can make a check succeed or you can make a check fail and just bypass the roll entirely, which works really well when you have something like, okay, like nobody wants the character to fail at this, but there is the chance, so or a cost should be borne out of it.
Yeah.
That metacurrency spending is kind of like, okay, everybody at the table wants this to happen. Spending the metacurrency is like paying the value for that to happen. But something like, and the one that most listeners are probably going to be familiar with, D&D 5th edition, they use, and it's been a while since I played, so the rules may have changed or I may be recollecting them wrong, but the way they use them is that when you spend your action point, you can just re-roll a failed roll, and to the best of my knowledge, that's pretty much all you can do with it, which to me is just unfun because, oh, I only have one action point that I can stock at a time. I'm going to spend it to try to re-roll this failed roll. Oh, I still failed.
Yeah, that doesn't seem ideal.
No,
Like
like that.
if you're gonna do it, at least do it in a way that's like, oh hey, this is if you're gonna spend a meta currency or a fortune point, whatever you want to call it, at least have it so that when you spend it, it actually makes a difference.
Yeah, and like it depends on like how often you get them too, because once again, recollecting here, if memory serves, 5th edition, each character, like it's not a pool, each character has their own supply, and you can only ever have one action point at a time, and the action points are doled out fairly rarely by the GM. So it's this precious resource that might not make a difference anyway, which just makes it hilariously unfun to play with. And back when I was playing 5th edition, I don't think we ever actually remembered that action points existed ever.
No, I think I remember you playing Twilight, Twilight 2000, the war game that
Yes.
had that fantastically awkward interaction with the table and a customer walking in.
Yep,
If
2000.
Yep. So, folks, if you don't remember this story, I will briefly recap it. Twilight 2000 is a Cold War era game set after things went to the shit. And I think it's set around 2000, but things went to shit in the 90s. So you have that weird historical technology only progressed up to a certain point. Anyway, the group are playing in Eastern Europe.
Hmm.
One of the characters just happened to be Ukrainian. And again, this game started, when did it start? Like 2020?
Yeah, I remember it started right around the same time the war did,
In
because
Ukraine.
yeah, we had been talking about playing it for a while, like before everything out there was happening in real life. And then when the game
And
itself, and then when we had time to play, it was kind of, this feels.
it, yeah, so it felt off, but at the same time, we also recognize I'm not playing this one, recognized it also as just a game. And it was fine for quite a few weeks until one day you heard someone say it was an in character statement. I don't care. I just want to kill more Russians. As a customer walked in and just froze. And I
Yeah.
caught this and I said, that's an incredibly awkward thing, but they are playing a tabletop RPG game. And the person who said it just happened to be the owner who span around in absolute fear. And then they proceeded to get a full rundown of the game. At which point, ironically enough, I think the person was more inclined to buy the game or at least
Yep.
look into it more because I think they were an RPG player themselves. So it did work out. It was just that was the moment where like maybe we need to watch what we're saying specifically in character in relation to current news events. But again, like you just had no idea.
No, and it's one of the same reasons that we don't really get into any real heavy subjects or like romance or anything in the
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday games, because it is at a game shop right in front of the cash register. So
It's
anybody
all
that comes into the shop is going to hear and see all of it, and it doesn't bother me, but
it's it's funny. For the most part, I also it doesn't bother me. What I'm more conscious of is the language that's being used. Like
Yeah.
subject matter ultimately is irrelevant, but it's specific, like the language being used around the kids that come in. I don't give a shit
Oh
if a
yeah.
kid, like I don't give a shit if kids come in and they hear us talking about violence, religion, whatever. Like nudity just doesn't come up because it's a game that you talk about. It's not one that you see, and so it's just one of those things. Fighting monsters, yeah, whatever. Religious aspects to it, because if a game has priests and that sort of thing, yeah, whatever. That's not on me. That's on the parent if they want to have that conversation. Oh, they're just playing a game. Okay, cool. It's the certain language being used
Yeah.
that we have no issue using on this show, which I'm well aware of. I'm in no way, shape, or form approved when it comes to saying fucking shit like that. It's just very much I don't want to be having that awkward conversation with the parents. Like, why are you swearing in front of my kid? Because these guys are idiots and I can't control them.
And we're in public.
Yeah. And it's not always an issue. It's usually an issue when the game gets really intense and there
And
happens to be
filters
a
drop.
and filters drop and there just happens to be a youngling walking in. Because of the time of day that that game is played, it's very rare that a youngling walks in as the game gets that intense, which usually happens around like 8:30 is when the filters start dropping. Most kids are in bed by then, especially over the winter. But as summer rocks on, it tends to be a bit. Anyway, this is neither here nor there in terms of action points. We've beyond tangented on this one.
I'm gonna
When
rip her back here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question about using an action point in terms of like the individual ones in D&D you get awarded. How I feel like in Pathfinder you can get them, and but the Twilight 2000, I recall you actually had action points that you were used, and they were given fairly easily because there's been a couple of times where people are like, oh, I'm going to use an action point to redo that or re-roll that,
Yeah, and that's
and
that's something where, like, with something like D&D, action points feel kind of like a very bolted on afterthought. Like, oh, people want a metacurrency in the game, let's staple one onto the side of it. But something like Twilight 2000, and especially something like Savage Worlds, which is one I tend to play a lot, their metacurrencies are built like right into the system, and like the system is expecting you to use them semi-frequently. Like in something like Savage Worlds, each person has their own pool of, they're called bennies in Savage Worlds, like benefits. And the game is expecting that those are flowing back and forth between the GM and the players fairly frequently. Their effects aren't as strong as they are in Shadow of the Demon Lord. Like in Savage Worlds, it is, you can spend a Benny to try not just to, but try to soak up damage, or you can spend it to re-roll a roll, but there's no automatic success or failure. But you're also almost always going to have at least a small pool of them available to you, unless you're just spending them like a fire hose.
which
So
is which is a fantastic analogy.
yeah, so because they're so much more frequent and easy to use, the fact that their effects aren't as strong is perfectly fine, because it's, hey, oh, that didn't work. Darn, I still have 3 more in the tank I can use. No
Yeah,
worries, I'll try again next time. While something like D&D is the worst of both worlds, worst of all worlds in that effect, because the system feels bolted on, you barely get any of them, and the effect kind of sucks.
it the thing is I think the way they've been described in D&D, like you said, it feels bolted on and it doesn't feel like it's an effective use of the nature of what a meta currency is in any way, shape, or form. It just feels like
Yeah,
it's oh, hey, you want a chance to re-roll. Like that to me is very much hey, guys, hey, players, sometimes your GM might let you re-roll, sometimes they might not. Because we know the rolls can suck, sometimes we're going to build in a way that you can re-roll.
yeah, and
That
like,
that's all that is. Whereas at least when it comes to Shadow of the Demon Lord, given the example, the only one I really know about, it's
mm,
very much hey, these are going to be randomly assigned to you. The GM rolls a die at the beginning of the session to find out how many additional action points the group gets in addition to the first 3, I think, that is given.
Yeah.
Two or three that are given. And then at that point, it's a, hey, you can use these. The only function is to change a d6 from a 1 to a 6 or a
Yeah.
2 to a 6, right? It just pushes it to a 6. It doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, it's maximize a d6, turn any success into a failure, any failure into a success, or you can recover twice your healing rate, which honestly you guys probably need to be using more often. But
Yeah,
I'm
we probably
GM.
do.
But
Yeah.
one of the really fun things that I really like with the fortune pool in Shadow of the Demon Lord that not a lot of other systems do, and only really works because the fortune points are so powerful in Shadow of the Demon Lord, is that when I roll the number at the start of the adventure to see how many fortune points they're going to get for that adventure, they don't know what the total is. So
No.
in most other systems, like if you're playing Savage Worlds, you know you have 3 bennies you can spend, and then as you spend that number and it goes up and down, you always know exactly how many you have.
And,
In
and
Shadow of the Demon Lord, when the adventure first starts, the players can be a little more careless with it because they know they have a minimum of 3 to work with. But as the adventure goes on and they start getting spent, then there's that question of, oh, is there another one in the tank that I can use if I need to?
no,
Which really helps with that kind of, it's a fantasy horror setting. So that bit of
exactly.
anxiety around it ties in very well with the themes of the game.
Now, the question I have for you, this is a genuine question. Were you
Yes.
rolling them every session we had, or just at the beginning of every cave dive, effectively?
So that is another one of those small rule tweaks that were made to accommodate for us not really obeying the adventure structure of Shadow of the Demon Lord at all. Because the way it's supposed to work, and keep in mind, this is like the fortune pool system is official, but it's an alternate rule system to the basic fortune system. 'Cause the basic fortune system is players have their own, and they gain them from like good role playing. But because we're just doing a standard
Effectively
dungeon
not.
delve,
Yeah,
there's barely any role playing happening. It's like, all right, I'm going to do a more general group focused one.
fair.
And because we're not doing discrete adventures, then yeah, no, it's each adventuring day, however many sessions that takes, each adventuring day is re-rolling the pool. Because the way we're running the game is that you guys, each session we play, however many sessions it takes, is you guys going down, delving until you're all nearly dead or just need to turn back for whatever reason, then going back, and then between that session and the next session, there's like 4 weeks of like downtime in game where your characters are living and spending money and practicing skills and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah. So that also makes sense. And now I think that in terms of tweaking the rules as to how you structure that, the way you've done it, I had no idea it was that much of an adjustment. It makes complete
Hmm.
sense that that's how it's done.
Like I,
In
I, re- I really should have just used like one of the many great OSR systems to run this mega dungeon, because that's what the
yeah,
mega dungeon is designed for.
you've mentioned
But
OSR already, and I have no idea what that acronym means.
sorry, I'm pretty sure we've talked about
We
this at some point.
probably have, and it was probably episode 1, and it's one of
But
those things where
it's
I've just forgotten.
the I can't remember which retronym came first or acronym came first, but it's either old school Renaissance or old school Revival, and just depending on which sub faction in the RPG industry you're talking to.
Fair
But
enough.
the general idea is that it's people who are taking like the design and the ethos of like old early D&D and using that as the basis for the games they're making.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of like you said, the action points are where you're doing it. With them being, we have no idea how they are. It's actually hilarious when you're like, do we use a point? No, we're fine. And I think to your point of us not using them to heal, that's exactly why is that we're all gambling that we can go a bit further. We can go a bit further. And
And it's
how many, like my last clockwork blew up specifically because I was willing to gamble and not heal in time. This one blew up because I think you just happened to roll really well for
Yeah,
damage. And
you guys were rolling really well for like the first half of the session, and right towards the end where this all happened, your rolls went to shit and my rolls took off. So it
yep.
was just, you know.
And ironically, I'm like, oh, I have 10 health left. Oh, that's fine. I'm more than happy with this. And then I got hit once, and the next one, I'm like, I'm gonna use a healing potion, which would have been a smart choice to do. But in this
Yep.
game, healing potions take effect at the end of the round, which would have been irrelevant given that on your roll you hit me for 2 points of damage, which was everything I had left.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny in that instance because specifically you're playing a clockwork. When clockworks hit 0 points, they turn into an object, which means that they can't, you know, take magic healing, which means that, you know, yeah, if you had drank the potion and not been hit, you would have healed. And if anybody else had have drank the potion, they would have been healed at the end of the round regardless. But because you become an object,
You
it's
don't get healed.
yeah, it would have stopped functioning for you.
Yeah, exactly. And the potion would have been wasted. So it's
Yeah.
funny that in that case, ironically, it works out in our favor. It would have worked out in our favor had I not blown up. Which, in
Yeah.
again, as we've established, the end result of using the action point was I did not blow up. But again, so I think that that is a case of where tweaking the rules for using the action point worked because we all found it hilarious. It is
Yes.
probably not the best practice to go into. Oh, I'm going to redo that roll I did 4 turns ago. No,
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 would not let that happen.
no. And honestly,
And
most GMs aren't going to let the way it happened the way you allowed it to happen. In that, well, why not? It's kind of funny.
yeah, like if we had been playing this for a year and you guys were super familiar with the rules, then I probably wouldn't have been so lenient either. But it was
Exactly.
mostly just, hey, you guys need to remember that this is an option because, you know, you're in a very lethal game and you need these lifelines.
And well, I mean, case in point, when my last clockwork died and I was redoing this one, I found on a character sheet that I had a boon a
Oh
boon of
God.
resurrection. And I
Yeah,
said to Anko, like, after, like, hey, I found this. Would this have done anything? He's like, yeah, that would have saved both of your characters. I'm like, ah, shit.
yeah, yeah,
It was
and that's
just in a space on the character sheet that I hadn't been flipping to because it was the only note I had on that page.
yeah, and it's one of those things where, you know, your character got it. Like I think that's at the beginning of that session, but
I think it was the
there's
one
always
before.
just so much going on.
Yeah, like, and again, because I'm also technically working at the time, I don't
Mm,
even know if it was that session, the one before, but either way, it was
yeah,
one where I just didn't. I know you're right, it was that session. It was very, very, very beginning, and I was clearly not focused because I was doing other stuff. And I think you had wrote, "Oh, hey, you've got this." I'm like, "Great," wrote it down, went back to serving the customer I was with, and that was that.
yeah.
And then it was the next week. I'm like, "Oh fuck, I wonder what this was."
What was this, Anko? That was the thing that would have saved everyone.
Yep. Like, so I think given that previous experience, Anko was a bit more lenient with allowing us
Yeah.
to adjust the role a bit.
Although
And
that does remind me of the hilarity of the fact that the spot where your second character was going to blow up was directly on top of the spot that your original character did blow up.
which is again absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
It's funny, we were coming up to that spot, I'm like, I have a bad feeling about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
One thing I do want to touch on too
mhm.
is that, you know, speaking of metacurrencies in general, and since I touched on the OSR as well, there's definitely people who, and this is a playstyle preference, who absolutely hate the idea of metacurrencies because for them, and I very much understand it, it's the same reason they don't like playing games like Apocalypse World or stuff that's more narrative focused. For them, you know, metacurrencies take them out of playing their character because it's like a resource that the player is using to manipulate the world and not just like something their character is capable of doing.
Genuinely, my last question was going to be, should you use metacurrencies in a game? And I think you've answered that in a way that it depends on how strict you want to be with the role play.
Yeah,
And
and there's games that are all about role playing that are also almost entirely metacurrencies. But it's just like how does your group prefer to approach the game? Because if you're very into like simulationist, the dice fall where they may, we
yeah,
go and we're focused on playing this one character, and then the world like exists around us. Metacurrencies probably aren't going to be your jam
it,
just because they are things that the player uses to directly affect the fiction, and that can take some people out of it.
and I think that does touch on what we were talking about with character death last episode, in that, yeah, death happens, but you may be playing games where you really invested in the character and you really don't want them to die. Nothing's going right. Okay, this is where you can use a meta currency and not feel bad, rather than the
Exactly.
GM having to, oh no, I fudged a dice roll, or oh no, he's actually not that interested in this because you can't roll above a 3.
Yeah.
So it's very much a case of the meta currency also allows the GM to not back out of a dice roll, but help
It's a bit of a
adjust the
buffer.
fiction. Exactly. So should you use meta currency? Yes, it depends how strict you're going to be in the role playing, but at the end of the day, these things we play are supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be entertaining. People are going to kill me for this, but it is just a game, and it's supposed to be fun and enjoyable. Yes, there's going to be a story. It's going to be emotional. It can be enraging. It can be full of joy, but you're supposed to enjoy the experience. And if using a meta currency helps you with that, personally, I have no issue with it.
Exactly. For me, it's just, as long as the system is designed with the metacurrency in mind, then I'm happy. Because I've played them without, I've played them with. I've enjoyed systems on both sides of that divide. But the ones that I don't enjoy are the ones that the metacurrency is very clearly just slapped on top with no thought of how it actually affects the rest of the system.
Hey, it's like D&D.
I wasn't going to say it directly, but yeah.
Folks, before we make everyone angry with other opinions that we may or may not be about to share, this is where you're supposed to say game on, and then we end the recording. But you're missing the thing that I'm laying up for you.
Can I spend an action point and recover that one?
100%.
Game on, folks.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.